Hello, everyone. Welcome to RJ Julia. My name is Jackie, and I am one of your event hosts this evening, along with Liz. Thank you so much for joining us. I have the okay. I have the great pleasure of introducing our guest of honor tonight, Megan Abbott. A little bit about Megan before we get started. Megan Abbott is the Edgar Award-winning author of 11 crime novels, including You Will Know Me, Give Me Your Hand, and the New York Times bestseller, The Turnout, all of which we have at the register tonight if you're interested in reading them and you have not had the chance. Megan joins us tonight to discuss her newest novel, Dorado Drive, which has been described as surprising and electrifying as a summer storm, and a novel that deftly examines hope, need, greed, and the complicated angles of sisterhood. It is suspenseful, beautifully written, and quite simply explicit. I think that review pretty much speaks for itself, but I think it's safe to say that if you pick this up, make sure you set aside a lot of time because you will not want to put it down. We will have time for Q&A as well as a sign line after the event. So if you haven't had a chance to get your copy of the book yet, we have them available at the registers, and we will after the event as well. So without further ado, I'm going to hand it over to Megan. Enjoy.
Thank you so much. Thanks for coming out. So I thought I'd just talk a little bit about how I came to write the book, and then just read a tiny portion, and then hopefully just have some Q&A, which I always think is the most fun part. So the idea for the book came during the pandemic, and I was watching, especially on social media, the resurgence of all these what you might call questionable money-making opportunities being promoted. Those ones and they were particularly ones that target women, and they would be like, you can sell essential oils from your home and make $50,000, or vitamins or fat burners, and then sort of sketchy female empowerment operations, these sort of female gifting circles, and they were called pay it forward clouds, where all of them, the idea is that there's some kind of buy-in, right? Either you have to buy an enormous amount of the product that then you sell, or you put your money in and it's promised that you will get money back times 5, times 10, etc. So they're basically pyramid schemes, in the simple parlance. And I was sort of fascinated by why it seemed to be happening all at once, and I started to read about it. It turned out that it really spike in times of economic uncertainty, which kind of makes sense. People are worried, and particularly target women, because women often maybe have left the workforce to raise their children, and it's harder to jump back in, or there's still children at home and have to take care of them, especially during the pandemic. So they really kind of prey on women, but this is a really long tradition. It really goes back to Tupperware and Mary Kay. I remember both of those in my household as a kid growing up. And then just at that time, and this is why it's particularly resonant to be here tonight, I watched the documentary Murder on Middle Beach, which I'm sure many of you know. And part of that documentary focuses on these gifting tables. Did any of you some of you seen that? I would assume so, but I didn't want to. Yeah. So that seemed to me so fascinating to get inside of how women become involved in these clubs, and what their motivations are, and how different and complex they can be, and how that it can feel in many ways like, what could be wrong with this? And that really fascinated me, and I that sort of, especially women that maybe you wouldn't think would be involved in this, because they're living fairly stable middle class lives, at least from the outside. So that was really the impetus for the book, because what I really wanted to do is explore women and their relationship to money, because money is never just about money for anyone, but I think for women it's often so connected with security, independence, privilege, revenge sometimes, but it's very emotional, and all our ideas about money go back to childhood often, whether our parents talked about money, whether we felt like there was enough of it or not. So that this felt like the perfect way to explore that. And I wanted to set it in, I've never set a book in my hometown, which is Grosse Pointe, which is outside of Detroit, but it's really was sort of the perfect place because it's set in 2008, the last recession. And at that time, everyone was facing the recession and the housing crisis, but Detroit was particularly hard hit because it was the same time that the auto industries were collapsing. Two of the big three auto companies were about to declare bankruptcy, and then the bailout, the federal bailout piece. So Grosse Pointe is really where all the big auto people lived, and it was sort of the first time, growing up in the 80s in Detroit, it was already the sense that the golden era was over, Detroit was over, the city had emptied out. It's very different now. It's really revitalized stuff. But when I was growing up, it was empty. There wasn't a single grocery store in all of Detroit. You couldn't get street lights to go on. So, or whereas Grosse Pointe, which is just outside of it, had been fairly untouched. It's a very wealthy community. Not me, unfortunately, but you either in Grosse Pointe, you either live near the lake or the freeway, and I lived near the freeway. So it was a dividing line. But it was finally, by the time of the bailout, even the high up jobs, they were affected too, and so it was a sort of way to also explore generational decline or downward mobility. I think there's always this hope that your kids will do better than you did and have more chances and opportunities. And what does it mean if maybe they won't because the economic situation? I'm talking about like this book. My book is about economics, by the way. It's not at all. It's about women behaving badly. So I'll switch to that. But anyway, I have an abiding fascination with sisters. I've written a lot of books about sisters, and so I wanted the book to center on three sisters, all in their 40s. They all become involved in this money making operation called the Wheel, and sisters, they're so complex. There's this inherent competition often between them. There's deep loyalty. There's often microaggressions and decades long grudges, and then deep, unshakable love. And I think, sisters, really all siblings, are kind of bound together because you're veterans of the same war, the war being your childhood. So these three sisters in Dorado Drive, Harper, Pam, and Deborah, all had a kind of calamitous childhood with sort of negligent parents. And the money kept going away. They when they were little, there was a lot of wealth. And with a lot of families, the oldest sibling has a completely different childhood than the youngest. So the oldest maybe experienced some stability in this case, and the youngest, all the money was already gone. So their childhood had a profound effect on their respective views of money, and so they all have different reasons to be enticed by the Wheel, this operation. And for Pam, she's coming off, this bad divorce. She's to reinvent herself in middle age. She's got to put her kids through college. And so the Wheel that promises her all this money seems to offer a new beginning, and a way to live her life her own way now for the first time. For Harper, who's the middle sister, or the youngest sister who never had any money, she has enormous credit card debt and some personal debt. So it's a way to get the boot off her neck. And for Deborah, who's the oldest sister, who has that crippling medical debt, it's very practical. She needs money badly. So this was sort of the idea, and they are in classic form enticed by really one of the ladies who lunch in town. One of the women, those women who maybe you are one of these women. I always wanted to be one of these women who's always in charge of everything. She's the head of the benefit committee. She's the head of the social committee. She's the leader of the parents club, the parent teacher association. So she knows how to get things done. And she knows how to raise money. Usually it's for charity, but why couldn't, the charity be one another? So she invites them to join the wheel, and one by one the sisters join, and while things get kind of complicated, let's just say, the money does start to come in, as it often does, especially if you're early in on these pyramid schemes. um but things get out of control. Of course, it's very hard to once you start making money to stop. And just, for pyramid schemes to work, it means constant recruitment. You have to get more and more women to join. And at a certain point, you're not just inviting, always, and this is true with Mary Kay and all, first you're asking your friends and family. But at a certain point, you have to ask people you don't know and that you don't necessarily can trust. So then things start to get messy. So things go awry from there. I won't spoil it, but I'm going to just read 2 pages from the very beginning of the book. And all you really need to know here is that Pam, the middle sister, who perhaps the most exciting one, that has lived the biggest life, um, is having a graduation party for her son Patrick, who just graduated from high school. So this is just a little bit of the preamble to the party. Everyone assembled at Pam's rental house on Dorado Drive for the graduation party she had been planning for weeks, maybe months, planning it like it was a wedding, a royal wedding even, and Harper half expected her nephew Patrick to arrive in a horse-drawn carriage. Mom, you don't have to, Patrick kept assuring her, worried until the last minute he might not make that gentleman's C in trigonometry. We could just hang out, it's cool. But Pam was the sister who planned parties, who hosted, who threw herself into everything, with the sweaty fervor of a general readying her troops for the final battle, the one to win the war. It made sense when she was married to Doug, when she was president of the junior league and chair of the parents club, when she lived in a 5-bedroom, 6-pound mansion on a canopied boulevard near the lake, and hosted 3 or more parties a month, dinner parties, fundraisers, meet and greets, luncheons, receptions. Those days were gone, long gone, which was maybe why this party meant far more, why it had the weight of a coronation, the eerie desperation of D-Day. It's beautiful, Harper told her, barely catching her sister as she flitted in and out of the house with trays, bags of ice, bug spray. I tried, Pam said with a sigh, the back of her hand on her forehead like a soap opera actress. I just want him to remember it forever. They both stood for a moment to take it all in, the backyard glimmering with candles and string lights, Norseman green and gold balloons, a half-dozen rented tables draped with gold linen, branches strung with miniature graduation cap streamers, garlands shimmying with graduation tassels, the ancient elm tree thick with bright paper lanterns, class of 2008. More than 20 years ago, Harper and her sisters had celebrated their own graduations on the grand lawn of the Hunt Club. Formal affairs that ended with all the parents drunk, their chairs tipping onto the grass, and all the kids escaping to the after parties in paneled basements and rec rooms all through Grosse Pointe. Now, as the auto industry's fortunes sank, most graduation parties resembled this one, stuffed into the backyard of Pam's split-level rental house on the optimistically named El Dorado Drive, the street that would forever remain aspirational, close as it was to shaggier St. Clair shores, a different county near the water, strange smells forever rising from the storm sewer drain. But somehow Pam made it all work, as she always did. You never even noticed the pitted aluminum siding, the yellowing lawn, the painted over window latches and sagging gutters. All you saw was Pam's magic. How many Bishop sisters, Perry shouted out, does it take to carry a cake? And everyone laughed as Harper, Pam, and Deborah lugged their mother's sterling silver cake tray across the yard to Patrick, his graduation robe ballooning behind him in the June breeze. On the tray sat the teetering party centerpiece, the money cake, a towering creation that had taken Pam hours to make, rolling dozens of crisp dollar bills around toilet paper dolls and glue gunning them to a styrofoam pillar at least 3 feet high. Everyone gasped as they saw it, pulling out their digital cameras, their disposable ones, to capture the spectacle. Money cake, money cake. They're all the rage this year, Deborah said, clearly relieved that all her son Stevie had wanted when he graduated was all-you-can-eat Buddy's pizza, a rented slushy machine, and a keg of beer. Jesus, Patrick said, running a finger along the dollar bills wrapped tight as cigars. Mom, Jesus. May the road ahead be paved with gold, Pam said, throwing her arms around her son, and the wind forever at your back. I don't think that's how it goes, Perry whispered to Harper. May the road ahead be paved with gold, Harper replied, lighting a cigarette, but we're stuck on a cul-de-sac. So that gives you a taste of. Have any of you seen these money cakes?
Yeah.
Okay, okay, yeah,
Yes.
they exist, right?
A friend of mine does it. Her sister does it for her daughter, and it's extravagant.
They're enormous.
They do take your breath.
They do. Yes, bills everywhere. And I was at an event last night in Philadelphia, and someone there had just made one for graduation, and was because there's two kinds of the one that we're talking about where the cake is made in money. Then there's the one where the money's inside the cake, and you pull it out. It's on this long string, and the money is sort of wrapped in plastic, and you and everyone has their Instagram on it, so pull the money out of the cake. So. I mean, I learned so much about it. I feel like I could make one now. I've studied all the recipes. I got pretty excited about it. That was part of my research for the book. But I would love to answer any questions you have either about the book or about writing or anything. Yeah.
So this is your 11th,
This is my 12th.
12th book. Okay. And your first book was.
The first novel is Die a Little, but I do have a nonfiction book before that.
Okay. So I wanted to talk with you a little bit about, or just hear your thoughts on your first fiction book, how you got the idea and sort of the process of writing that. And now that you've done so many more, have you found like the process of getting ideas is it different? And then the process of actually sitting down and writing, how's that different?
Yeah.
Since you've done so many.
Yeah, it's both different and the same, I guess. The first novel, you're always flying blind. I didn't even know I was writing a novel. There was something I was doing on the side. I didn't know how to make a plot. It was really just an idea. I had this idea. I wanted to set a novel. All my first four novels are all set in the mid last century, and they're all sort of like noir. They're very glamorous, and so I wanted to set a novel in the 50s, and I wanted to be about a sister whose brother marries a woman that the sister does not trust. And so that's really all the idea I had. I didn't even know it was a crime novel. I didn't know it was a crime novel till I saw it on a shelf. I mean, there are crimes in it. I don't know what I was thinking, but it wasn't. I didn't know what that really meant. So it was so long to figure out the plot, many revisions with when I got an agent and then with the editor. But now, then I had a full-time day job, which I had for my first 6 or 7 books. So it was writing on the side, which made it different. I had to be very disciplined. You still do it a different way. Now I write full-time. And I would say I don't produce any more pages than when I wrote part-time, but I suffer many more hours of the day. I'd say and the thing that's different that I've gotten better at is I do feel like I have a strong sense of story now, and I do feel like as always when you write thrillers or crime novels, you want to be in such synchronicity with the reader. You sort of really want to try to be, imagining what they're thinking, wanting to get a little ahead of them, and then maybe letting them get a little ahead. And so that stuff I would feel like I've gotten better at. And pacing in particular is always something that comes really only by experience. And so that stuff, for sure has changed. But in the end, you're still like, the blank page staring at you and is this book gonna work? I've written many books, 100 pages into a book, and I had to abandon it. It just didn't take off. It just, the thing that now I know, the best part is that I know that there are things that just will happen when I write the book, and I shouldn't panic about them. Like I'm going to hit the messy middle, as they say, which is always the worst part. And you feel like you're never going to get out of the middle of the book and that kind of stuff. But now I'm sort of patient with myself about that. It's a great question. Thank you. Other questions? Yeah.
My mom writing a short story.
Mhm.
And all of them are 400. I mean, it's so beautiful, but then the storyline, all these things at once. Um,
Yeah, I did start with short stories. I do think short stories is a way to start. And a couple of my books began as short stories. And then I felt there was more in them. And it is sort of a little like it's hard by the yard in by the inch it's a cinch. You don't think of it as a whole as a novel. Starting small and it will build itself. Um, I know some novelists that think really macro, when they start the novel. I don't. I think of an interpersonal dynamic like this. It's like I wanted there to be three sisters and I wanted them all to get involved in this money making operation. Beyond that, the rest sort of came piece by piece. So I think that's a big part of it is not to get overwhelmed by all of it. Especially if like me, your brain doesn't work that way. I think I'm operating mostly from character rather than like high concept or something. So then you start to follow the characters and the story will reveal itself if you're patient with it. And then, in revision, you can shape it more. But I would say, especially on a first draft, if you try to start a novel, like just write, just keep writing. Because it's like, I always think of like a sculpture. It's just this block of wood and you're sort of chipping away. Well, wood step, I mean, I guess you could, I mean, probably a piece of stone will be more accurate, So you're just chipping away at it little bit by little bit and then you get there. So that's how I usually think of it. Otherwise it can be overwhelming. It's always scary to start. Always. Every time. Yeah.
You know the ending when you start the book?
I do. I have to know that. I didn't always, but now that is another thing that's changed. Otherwise, it's dangerous, So now, a few times it has changed, but rarely the resolution, the who did it, never changes. But sometimes how we get there and how it feels changes a lot because I don't know the characters yet, so I don't know how it will feel when we find out or how we find out that stuff changes. But I do have to know. Otherwise, either I'd have to do such an overhaul, or I would feel like I'm not playing fair. When you write thrillers, this you have to play fair, or you can't have the twist ending where it's like, wait, that guy we met on page 60 he did, you can't do that. So you really, you need to do some planning. So I think that's usually what makes me need to know it, and I need to know it to sort of set things up, I think, properly. Though a few times a lot of the other elements have changed. If you had a question too, yeah.
I did. It sounds like you get an idea, right? How do you set yourself, like, what timeline do you give yourself, and how do you balance your life in a way that that doesn't overtake, and you say like, oh, I'm just gonna write for 4 months.
Yeah.
Like, how do you separate yourself from?
Yeah, it badly, I would say, very poorly. I do a lot of screenwriting. I'm adapting this for TV now. And but to balance having to sort of there, I have very strict deadlines. Publishing deadlines sort of strict, but they're more flexible. There's a little more room to play, but I will say I'm a compulsive writer, so that helps. I really have to make myself stop. But that's my pathology. That's not a good response. I mean, I don't manage it well. It is very hard. It is, one way I think about it is like some days I'm just not producing pages, or I'm not able to. Something in my life has intervened, and I always think of what the great Walter Mosley always talks about this. What's really important is not how many pages you produce, but that you're staying, your head is still in the book. So you're thinking about the book taking a walk, you're on the subway, I'm like solving a plot problem, I'm maybe at the movies and something shakes loose for me and I think so I'm staying, the book is in my head at all times. So you're writing even when you're not writing. At least that's what I tell myself. but it is very hard. It is very hard. And it can get, each book is its own beast too. Some of them unfold more easily than other ones. This one a lot of my books aren't set in a specific place. I try to keep it very general so the reader can plug themselves in. So setting it in my hometown made it, first of all, it gave me this strange nostalgia. I really hated my hometown, I should add. Just because I always felt out of place there. It was not my scene at the time, but now writing it and remembering old places and the place we used to go to get pizza and the place the public swimming pool and how much fun it was so emotional for me, and that sort of fed into the book, so that helped. Sometimes it's just a grind. Other question? Yeah.
So you are so good in your books at building dread, which I love how you do it. I hate what it does to me as I'm reading it, but I'm curious how conscious you are. I literally, the farther into one of your books I get, the faster I am turning the pages. And how conscious are you of that dread that always starts right in the beginning and then really builds to an unbearable level? How conscious are you of that as you're writing the story?
Yeah, I will say it is sort of how I think. I do, I mean, I do live with dread, so I wouldn't even call it dread, I guess. This maybe a better way to answer it is, mood is the most important thing to me. And I want the reader to feel sucked into something. And I think that's a lot of where the dread is. Like you're in it with the characters. You know it's a crime. I want to play with the notion that you're reading a crime novel. Something's going to happen. So you're trying to infuse everything with this feeling that something's going to happen. And that that's when from those the books I always love are the ones where you feel like you can hear the sound, smell the scents, you're really in it, and you're sort of carrying the anxiety of the characters. So I think, it's sort of the great joy to me of people who read thrillers is that they will bring most of that themselves. So I just have to set off a few alarms and they'll be ready. So it's just this game we play together. I think of it that way. It's one of my favorite things about writing is trying to get the reader to feel like they're in that place, even though they don't want to be there in many ways. It is a kind of, I always feel vaguely guilty for the whole operation. Another question? Yeah.
Each murder.
Yes.
Have you heard anything through the grapevine as to when the second season for that is?
No, I did look into it recently because I know the police have offered a reward now, a higher reward. I mean, you all might know more about this than I do, but in April, um, because I know that, the son who made the documentary he had done a Freedom of Information Act to get some of those police records, but they weren't all turned over. And because it's technically still an active case, the police are claiming that they have a suspect. They won't name the suspect, but so that it's not a public case, so we're not going to deliver it. But it's very mysterious to me because there's supposedly DNA because they eliminated the suspect by DNA, but no one's been able to verify any of this. So what I suspect, I think when they announced that reward, I think the son did come forward. His frustration is completely understandable I don't know anything about the police department here, but it's very curious to me. There's not a lot of precedent for this that of a case that this is now how many years, 15 years ago, and they still won't release information to the son of the victim. So I think he probably to do a follow-up, he would need something to follow up, and they really, I mean, he's probably gonna have to get him a lawyer, would be my guess, and they're probably gonna have to take it higher up. But yeah, do any of you all know any more about that? If you have any contacts in the Madison Police Department? What did you all think of the documentary? Yeah.
It was well done. I mean, I actually know the family and the son was telling the story. So I think if you
Yes.
bring that, and you just keep reminding yourself of that, that there was a point of view, but I think Madison did a tremendous job. My understanding is another one is in the works, but I don't know any more than.
Yeah,
But-
yeah.
But I mean, it definitely was a point of view story being told, which we should probably differentiate from journalism, for
Right.
example.
That's right.
But I thought he did a beautiful job.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought it was remarkably balanced
Yeah.
for, often more balanced than some journalist-driven
Totally.
ones
Yeah.
are, because you do keep changing your mind what you think, and it is a puzzle in an enigma. What's that? There's so many.
Yes.
Yes. Just because there's so many suspects, one in particular, but there's
Yeah,
there's
the obvious one is the one who's been
cleared.
So, yeah.
Which is, he has a airtight alibi for himself being there, but and they claim that his DNA did not.
Now, did you use this as part of your research, or did you just learn afterwards that the Madison case involved?
I was following pyramid schemes, and it just happened to be airing, and there were a lot of documentaries about pyramid schemes. Though when I started it, I didn't know that was about, I just watch a lot of, of true crime. And then that was what, yeah. So it's sort of like the synergy of it. But someone was saying something about the documentary, or were you? I didn't mean to point you out, but I thought
I was thinking about,
Oh, yes.
and I don't know who was the suspect who was cleared. But how would you describe Doug?
In the book.
As he developed?
Yes. So Doug is Pam's ex-husband in the book. And so he's sort of the classic rising star in finance who seems to, makes a lot of money and then all of a sudden all the money's gone. And it's one of those divorces where if you like, now you would hire a forensic accountant if this were your husband, because where did all the money go? So he's not to be trusted. But in writing him, I will say I found him very charming. And this is my problem with men. I guess I could talk to my therapist about it. But you start by I was writing him as an antagonist, the bad ex-husband, who may or may not be involved in the things that happen in the story. You always want to have round characters, and so you don't want to just have someone who's just one thing, so Harper, the youngest sister, whose point of view we have for the book, kind of likes him too, and that's sort of infused with that. So it's based on a lot of men I knew growing up, in Grosse Pointe, who were great talkers. And they're and real love bombers, and the long hauls, they're not made for the long haul. So he was a fascinating character to write for me, because I kept giving him different soft spots. I often have this, this sort of dubious characters get my gentlest treatment off. It's yeah. the husband in the murder in Middle Beach case is not as charming, I'll say, to me. But interesting. A much more high stakes operator from what the documentary suggests. Truly, devastating scenes between the son and the father in that docu-series. Yeah, to see him evade his son's questions. Yeah.
And Madison had the courage to,
Yes, yes. Unbelievable. Yes. Any other questions? Yeah.
Can I ask one from left field?
Yes.
You know, I love your books, you know that. But one of the things that startled me and I loved very much was when you interviewed the Coen brothers for the Criterion Channel. And I was thinking, okay, these are two very headstrong, prickly guys who don't let people invade their spaces and so forth. And they couldn't get enough of you. It was a great documentary to watch, to see you interview them. How can you talk a little bit about your process and how you felt going in? And
Yeah.
you know, did you get the sense it was going okay at a certain point?
Yeah, boy, I always have to say they're the Coen brothers who directed so many of my favorite movies. And I interviewed them for the Criterion release of Miller's Crossing and then No Country for Old Men. And when I interviewed them the first time, I was terrified both times, I'll be honest. But the first time, because you see them in interviews and they're very difficult. They answer one-word answers to questions. They make jokes to each other, you know, and they do not suffer fools, let's just say. And then I was told, well, they'll let you interview them, but they don't want to talk about the movie. And I'm interviewing them about the movie. So they knew that I knew a lot about their inspirations, Dashiell Hammett and Raymond Chandler. They said they would talk about these crime novels that had inspired them. But then somehow that gave me a bona fides once I asked a few questions about that, and then they kind of relaxed. And were delightful. But then the second time I thought this is when it's gonna go because you know, it had gone well, but now and they've approved to me to come back. And I was doubly nervous because No Country for Old Men is a very different kind of movie and in some ways very controversial movie, particularly the ending. And the Criterion's like, make sure you ask about the ending. Oh no. But they were great. I don't know. Well, I mean, we'll say between takes or before and after, you know, they just love old movies and I love old movies. And somehow that they just, you know, I would kind of get in through the back door with them talking about stuff like that. And then they were just pussycat. So it was a relief though, because he thought, what if I interview my favorite filmmakers and they're awful to me and I would never be able to watch their movies without thinking of that. So yeah, I felt very lucky. I really don't think I could do it again though. Any other questions? Well, thank you all so much. This was such a delight.